Dear diary, mood, apathetic. My life is spiraling downward.
Oh, hello. Hello again. And for those of you who don't know me, hi, my name's Miranda, and welcome to this month's Reflective Practice blog. Today I'm bringing you my overwhelming sense of apathy, actually. I don't know entirely what's happened to me since I entered second year, but I don't know, my attitude has been stinking, to be fair, almost bordering on stroppy, which kind of made me think about something that one of our clinical tutors said to us at the beginning of training. He said that the doctorate is like the life cycle. So in first year, you are a child. Everything is so exciting and wonderful and new and fresh, and you're running around like,
what's this? What's this?
Everything's amazing. And then second year hits and you're an adolescent. You're angry, you're withdrawn, you're pointing fingers, you're blaming, you're digging your heels. And then third year, you become an adult. So you kind of resolve all of your issues of second year, and then you kind of get to a place where you're ready to take on the world and be a proper psychologist. And this feels like it fits with how I'm feeling at the moment. And so I started kind of digging back into our child development teaching just so I could reconnect to my adolescent self. And so some of you might be aware of this chap, Erickson. So he splits our life into these key stages, and at each stage you have this crisis that you need to resolve and overcome. And in adolescence, it's about role confusion and identity. And I think that makes sense for how I'm feeling at the moment. So I want to unpack this in today's video. So I'm going to bring 3 themes which I think are central to the adolescent experience. The first one being when you finally realise that your parents are fallible. So I think we can all remember that process when we started to realise as we were growing up that our parents, they're just people, just average people. They can make mistakes, they can hurt your feelings and disappoint you, and they can have elements of their character that quite frankly isn't for you. And I think I'm starting to have that with clinical psychology as a profession, which is hard, but I think in many ways was inevitable, just because clinical psychology is this profession which is like hidden behind these golden gates of the training program. And I think also because the doctorate is just like such a slog to get onto, it's so hard and people will work at it for years and years and years. Like honestly, where I'm at now, I'm like, this is 10 years in the making pretty much. And I think with that, you can't help but put something on a pedestal when you've been working for it for so long. And so I think there was naturally always going to be this kind of like hangover feeling where you're just like, oh, maybe this wasn't as great as I imagined it would be. Which I think is fine. I think it's like partly reality hitting. And I think I am starting to, because becoming a clinical psychologist is like, it's a when, not an if for me now, which is wonderful. And I'm really grateful for that. But I think because I have that security, I feel like I'm more able to look at the profession a bit more critically. And I think with that, you start seeing things that you don't particularly like. I think one of them being that clinical psychology seems to be really aware of and able to recognize issues which exist in other people or in other organizations. And we seem to really struggle with having the conversation about us as professionals or the institutions that we work in. Like on the subject of mental health, for example, why do we find it so difficult to talk about mental health issues amongst professionals? And also talking about how like the systems that we operate in, and sometimes like the expectations that we have of ourselves and our colleagues are not conducive to having positive mental health experiences. And it's kind of like, we're so fine with having these conversations about other people, but I sometimes get this sense that clinical psychology is just very much
like, oh, it's not our problem, it relates to everyone else, but it's like, it's not us.
Which, you know, I think it's very problematic when it comes to mental health, because like that's our thing, but then becomes even more powerful and pronounced when you think about issues relating to race and discrimination. Like we will bang the drum of just how these like systemic pressures really impact our clients and all of that good stuff, which is totally true. And yet we seem to be so uncomfortable with having those conversations about ourselves and turning inwards a little bit. And I say this also being encouraged by the fact that there seems to be loads of good conversations and people pushing this sort of stuff forward. But I think you can kind of sometimes see where this description of clinical psychologists as like sitting in their ivory towers comes from, because I think we do sometimes set ourselves apart from everything that is real and messy, and it's like as if we are these like objective scientists, not even like objective angels, like looking in and being able to just like look at things in this really like pure and wonderful way, when actually I think we've got lots of issues and maybe we're not really doing a particularly good job of looking at them and addressing them. Another central aspect of the adolescent experience is the identity crisis, and I do actually feel like, now that I'm thinking about it and talking about it, that is part of what's going on for me. Because, like, clinical psychologists, I feel like we all have this sense of what they look like, how they behave, what their values are, how they think, and how they speak, like, especially how they speak. Like, I think we're all aware of the stock phrases that you'll hear banded around all the time when groups of psychologists come together to talk amongst one another, like saying things like,
I was just reflecting that.
and like,
I'm just really mindful of.
And can I just give you this gentle reminder that...
and it's just like all of those things. I'm like, ooh, like, and just with this entire section, can I just say, like, I'm pointing the finger and mocking no one but myself. And I think the reason I feel this kind of cringe and I'm laughing, because that's just not me. Like, what am I doing? And also, what do I sound like? And I think part of that really does come down to like how difficult it is to get onto the doctorate. And I think we all make efforts as aspiring psychologists to try and emulate other psychologists, and so we like copy and we mimic and we pick up things, and particularly the way that they communicate amongst each other, to show like,
Hey, like, I could be part of this group, like, accept me, offer me a place.
and I totally understand, and like I think I've completely done that up until now. And then I think you get onto the other side where maybe you don't have to pretend anymore, because you're like in the group and you're gonna qualify and you're gonna be a clinical psychologist, like touching wood always. You're just a bit like, what am I doing here? And I think I should say there are elements of the clinical psychology persona which I think are lovely, you know, being really sensitive to things and observant and really thoughtful in how you present ideas, etc. But I think on the other side, there are elements of it which A, don't fit me, or B, I feel like I do have those traits, but they're also traits that I'm trying to shed. And so, like, certain things, like, I feel like sometimes as psychologists we can be tentative to the point where it seems like we're either devoid of any opinions or completely incapable of making a decision. And that's so completely at odds with who I am, because I'm opinionated and very decisive about pretty much everything. And I think there's this aspect where, like, things somehow become really sickly sweet. Like, the way that we talk about things and everything's so, like, and gentle, and, like, you know, I'm just so fortunate to have this experience, and I'm so lucky to work with this group of people. And it's like, it's very, like, pious and Mother Teresa-like. And I don't know, I think I'm being a bit, like, sassier with my words, just because, like, I think I'm probably uncomfortable with the fact that, like, I just don't think I'm that good of a person, and, like, I have bad thoughts and I can be really tongue-in-cheek and sarcastic and all of these things that I think feeling the pressure to, like, talk like that and act like that, I'm just like, it's a very heavy load to carry. I think this is, like, super exacerbated by the fact that I think in clinical psychology there is pressure, like there is in no other profession, to really, like, sever the ties between your professional self and your personal self and just, like, cut it down the middle, like they're two separate entities. And, like, when you're working with someone in therapy, like, God forbid they might be able to infer something about what you're like as a person. And it's like, you know, you have to be this blank slate, but then there's also these messages of, like, you know, just be a person, just be human, just be kind. And it's like, I don't know how to be both. I don't know how to be myself and also be nothing. Like, it doesn't feel like it makes sense. And I think kind of this pressure to, like, not bring kind of your personal side into it is difficult, because I feel like it strips the work aspect of like your individuality, but also like your humanity and just being able to have like an authentic human to human interaction with people. And I suppose this feels difficult because it's like the profession feels as though, I appreciate this might be my perception, but it feels like there are these expectations of how like you should behave, and it just feels like, God, I have to like represent the profession, and that feels like it's a difficult one, because like in many ways I just want to represent myself and just like be proud of the work that I'm doing without having to carry this looming title of clinical psychology and like the institution that trained me and things like that. And I think that's also like one of the reasons that I don't mention like on these videos where I'm studying, because I don't want to feel the pressure of having to like represent something bigger than just me. But I think boiling down to what it is that's actually the issue, it always takes me a little while. I think there is just like a bit of a fear that I can't really be myself in this profession, and maybe like I don't necessarily fit in the way that I thought I did, and that there's going to be, in order to like function as a clinical psychologist, there's always going to need to be this performative quality to what I'm doing, and I'm going to have to act in a way that like doesn't really feel like me. And I don't know, that feels like quite an exhausting prospect, to be fair. So lastly, touching on rebellion, because I don't think you can really address and reflect on your adolescent stage without thinking about rebellion. And that's something I definitely feel like I'm doing at the moment. Like I said at the beginning, like I'm stroppy to the point of acting like a brat. Like I'm really looking at myself like,
you are very old and you need to play your age and not 12.
And I think part of that is, you know, I'm in a stage where there's a heightened sense of evaluation. You know, I've got a case report due, it's my end of placement review, I've got various things ticking over with my research project, and so I do feel like the demands feel quite high at the moment, and I'm just fighting against that in a way that's really non-productive, because ultimately I have to get these things done. But I think because of the the undercurrent of this like apathy and really questioning the profession, really questioning like my identity within that, I'm just like pushing against it an awful lot and kind of getting into these internal battles with myself with respect to the work, and just like feeling super aggrieved by anything that's being asked of me, which is really mature. And I think, again, as everything seems to boil back down to just how hard it is to get into the doctorate, this is another symptom, because I just think like becoming a clinical psychologist is like one long delayed gratification task. Like, you know, the kids with the marshmallows, and they're like looking at the marshmallow, you can't have the marshmallow. Like becoming a clinical psychologist is like this carrot that's always waved in front of you, which is great, but this has been like almost 10 years in the making that I've had this frigging carrot waved in front of my face. And I think like now that I'm just almost at the finishing line, I'm like, I don't care! And I think, you know, I think I'm feeling like frustrated, I'm questioning things, I'm probably tired, and I don't have the kind of energy reserves and enthusiasm that usually like pushes me through things when I'm finding them really hard. And I think it just like, it ties back to that like identity aspect and seeing the profession as fallible, because when it's like, oh God, like I don't know if I like this and I don't know if I fit into it, I think there's also that pulling away of like, why am I working so hard for this, and why am I making things so difficult for myself? Like, I don't know, I've had some real moments, especially because, which I think is accentuated by the world that we're living in at the moment, but I am like 200 miles away from my family, my partner, like my lifelong friends, to do this course and to have this experience. And, you know, when it's all well and good when you're like,
this is exactly what I wanted.
This is exactly what I'm destined to do. But now I'm kind of coming away from that and questioning that, and just like on a very different part of that kind of development process, that it makes that stuff a lot harder, I'm not gonna lie. Like I have moments where I'm just like, why am I doing this? Like, why have I made it all so difficult? Like, and for something that I'm just like, doesn't feel as much of a perfect fit as it felt before. So to bring some of these thoughts to a close, like I feel like I really just want to be clear that I am aware that this is probably like, it's just the phase that I'm going through. And I'm sure my third year self will look back on this and be like, will you just calm down? You're gonna be fine. Like I know elements of this probably seem like very dramatic and over the top. I'm aware of it, but I think it does, like looking at things through a developmental lens, like I feel like I am realizing the importance of it because it's helping me see that I'm trying to develop and forge my professional identity. It's not necessarily that like I hate psychology and like I hate my course. I'm just trying to find a space of me within this bigger entity and this bigger body. And I think it's just that like classic adolescent tension where like you really want your independence but you're also really scared of it, and so you like oscillate between like wanting to clutch on to mum and dad and then like go boldly on your own. And I'm definitely kind of in that middle messy bit, and so I think I'm just going to try and like think about it a little bit more. I do think some of this is going to probably come from developing my own professional confidence and knowing that like I'm being trained in something and I can also interpret things and make it my own, and it's okay to be me as a clinical psychologist. I just have to feel comfortable with that as well. Okay, so before I go down another rabbit hole, I am going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for listening to my stream of consciousness. If you have any thoughts and comments, you know I always love to hear them. But until next time, look after yourself and ciao for now.